Community members, welcome. My name is Antoine Craigwell, and I'm here with the Ancestral Institute, and we are hosting our third webinar in the series leading up to the Ancestral Institute's gathering in Puerto Rico. Today we are highlighting and featuring Izandry Mbotja. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing their name correctly, but they will certainly correct me. And Izandry will be talking about or looking at ancestral calling and its role on psychological well-being amongst the Pedi tribe. So this is part of a series, and at the end of this webinar, we will ask you to join us and evaluate and provide an evaluation for Izandry's presentation. And we would want to preview and look forward to the next webinar on October 15th that is going to be presented by Ms. Letsualo. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Izandry Mbotja. Izandry, over to you.
Good day or good afternoon, everyone. I'm not really comfortable with the camera because I didn't know that I will have to switch on my camera. So I don't know. I don't really feel comfortable with the way I look. So I just thought maybe I should switch on the camera now for the introduction so that everyone can be able to see who Izandry is, be able to put a picture to the name. So my name is Izandry Mbotja, and I am a researcher and a student at the Nelson Mandela University, a PhD student at the Nelson Mandela University. So let me share my screen. Okay, there. So how do I move? Anthony, can you please help me with
What is it?
moving?
What is the difficulty?
I'm seeing like if when I move forward with my presentation,
you just click, just press the down buttons. It's moving.
Yes, it is moving, but I can still see the participants on the side. So
that's fine. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
It covers my screen. That's the thing. Like some of the things that I'm going to be.
So then just minimize the screen, go up to the top and just click minimize, and it will just present you alone in one box.
Okay, it's fine. I'll just continue like this.
Well, so, yes, but just please continue.
Yes, the topic of my presentation is the effect of ancestral calling and initiation process of individual psychological well-being. So the focus will be on why the Pedi tribe. Out of all the tribes in South Africa, why did I choose the Pedi tribe? And then we'll also look at the manifestations of ancestral coding, the repercussions of rejecting or ignoring an ancestral coding, the effect of ancestral coding and initiation process on individual psychological well-being, and lastly, the initiation process, which is ukutwasa or rotwasa in Pedi culture. So why the Pedi tribe? There are 4 main tribes in South Africa. So the South African Black population is divided into these 4 main tribes, which is the Nkuni tribe, which consists of the Zulu, the Xhosa, Ndebele, and Swati people. And then the second one is the Sotho. The Sotho consists of Basotho, Batswana, and Bapedi. And then the third tribe, which is being the Tsonga tribe, which consists of the sub-tribes like Donga, the Chwa, and the Ronga. And then finally, we have what we call the Venda tribe, which only has the Venda people. It doesn't have the sub-tribes. So within these subgroups, there are numerous subgroups with Zulu and Xhosa, which are the main or the largest tribes, and most probably even the well-known tribes. Most people, when you tell them that I'm from South Africa, they will ask you, are you Zulu? Because this is the most popular tribe that most people know, or sub-tribe from the Nguni tribes. So most of the studies as well have been conducted focus on these Nguni tribe, within little attention being given to the Pedi tribe or Pedi culture in general. And most studies have focused on describing the healing process rather than the psychological well-being of healers themselves. So it seems as if though they don't care about how the healers feel or how this calling has affected them throughout the process. So there's also a disconnection between the Western diagnostic tool and cultural needs and requirements as well. So therefore, that's why I decided that I will be able to provide a more comprehensive picture of the ancestral calling amongst the Pedi tribe and its role on their psychological well-being and how it have highlighted in South Africa. Because with my experience, when I look or when I search on Google Scholar or any other sites where I can find documents or articles to read, most are in Nguni or other cultures or African cultures, but we don't have anything in Pedi. So as a Pedi person, I decided that I'm going to put our tribe on the map so that people from other countries, when they try to search, they can find information on the Pedi culture or on the Pedi tribe as well. So that is the reason why I decided the Pedi tribe. So now let's look at ancestral calling. Ancestral calling is a calling from the ancestors to either become a traditional healer or a diviner. So ancestors are considered to be the living dead. These are the members of the family and
Izandry, you're muted. Izandry, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you, yes. So you
Okay.
might want to repeat what you were saying earlier about ancestral calling.
Okay, so ancestral calling is a calling from the ancestors to either become a traditional healer or a diviner. So ancestors are considered to be the living dead, members of the family and kinship who have passed away, but also still present in a spirit form. So in various ethnic groups, to become an ancestor, one must have died a good death. That is, one must have died by suicide, accident, or other types of violence, with the possible exemption of heroic military deaths. So if maybe you've committed suicide, you've been involved in an accident, and then you will not be considered an ancestor. You must have died a good death. So now, I don't know why it's getting difficult for me to operate. Okay, so now let's look at the manifestations of ancestral calling. We have anxiety, we have mental disorientation, we have mood swings, visual and auditory hallucination, delusions, social isolations, and constant vivid dreams. these are some of the symptoms of ancestral calling. Some example, people have mentioned seeing a snake speaking to them in their dreams. Other symptoms are restlessness, aggression, abuse, and violence. So there's also a strong tendency toward aimless wandering. The affected individuals sometimes vanish for days. Your family might be looking for you, not knowing where you are. So they disregard their personal appearance and also hygiene. They skip meals and constantly look at physical, or when you look at them, they look like they're physically unaware. And then they become premature or have low sexual desires. They may become infertile and unable to produce children. So these, remember, are the manifestations of ancestral calling. So sometimes these things can happen, but it doesn't mean you have an ancestral calling. So they may be violent towards other people and also violate people's rights and conduct crime as well. So they may have multiple health problems, with the joints being the most popular symptoms. And then an individual may also have been a person who was always outgoing, always enjoyed being in a group of people, but then suddenly they don't want to be where there's crowded places, or being among crowds mainly exhaust them and drains them as well. And they get dizzy spells around people. So these are some of the symptoms or manifestations of ancestral calling. But however, the most consistent trait or the most consistent symptoms is excessive dreaming. So, which is very important. That helps the dreamer, I mean, the trainer as well, when you are undergoing a training, or when you're at the initiation school. So dreaming is the most consistent trait. They become the house of dreams. So individuals experiencing ancestral calling dream of water and rivers, of being drowned in the river or pool, or even actually immersing oneself in the river. Some have dreams about forest and animals, and or wild animals as well. So you might find one saying, I dreamed of a leopard, or having a conversation with the leopard, or these like stuff like that. So these are some of the symptoms of ancestral calling. So now, after experiencing the above mentioned symptoms or manifestations, individuals may choose to either accept or maybe ignore the calling. So in the next few slides, I will be discussing the initiation process of those who chose to accept the calling, followed by the repercussions of rejecting or ignoring an ancestral calling. So firstly, let's look at the initiation process, which is otwasa in the Pedi culture, or ukutwasa in Zulu and Xhosa. So the otwasa is a spiritual journey that is undergone by individuals who have received the calling from the ancestors, and it differs from person to person. The successful outcome of initiation and training is that that very person or that very individual will emerge as a traditional healer. So this training requires a radical change in one's life, largely because one becomes the servant of the ancestors. So now you're not by yourself, you are with the ancestors. Even people in your community start to respect you because you have that aura. So changes include diet and sexual activities. So in terms of diet, initiates are forbidden from eating takeaways or junk food. They are encouraged to slaughter animals for meat and cook it themselves. So no one is cooking for them, no one is saving them. So everything they do at the initiation schools, they do it for themselves. So they use their personal pots, using their own spoons that are not shared with others.
You don't his ears, Mama.
Okay. So the initiates or individuals who are undergoing the initiation process, they're not allowed to share their plates or spoons that they use. So they're supposed to use one plate throughout the initiation process and not even allowed to use it with anyone else. So an initiate is also discouraged from attending beer halls. These are the nightclubs and the taverns for drinking. What they are encouraged to do is that they are supposed to require and make their own traditional beer, which in my culture or in my language we call trotwa, which is Pedi. In Pedi, a traditional beer is trotwa, and in other language like Zulu and Xhosa, it's umqombothi. So in terms of sexual activities, initiates are encouraged to abstain from sex to accomplish the unpopulated or unpolluted sacred status of the traditional healer as medium with ancestors and ancestral spirits. So after accepting the calling, the spirit that has possessed that individual with the ancestral calling is now known as the messenger. So the owners of the healing also have control over the messenger. So the messenger can take various shapes. There is a messenger who acts and heals through herbs. We have another one who heals through water, and one that heals through prayer. So it depends on the kind of gift that you have. Some even combine both the prayer with the herbs or water with the herbs. So they can take you to the ocean, wash you with certain herbs in order, if you want to take out the black cloud that is over you, they can take you to the ocean and wash you with different herbs so that you can remove that dark cloud. Therefore, it all depends on the type of that messenger, remember, that possessed the individual with ancestral calling. So that is why it is not up to them or those individuals with ancestral calling to choose where they will be initiated, but it is up to the ancestors to show the person who will initiate them, as well as the location where they will be initiated. So I don't know if most of you have realized that there's a lot of people who have been initiating recently compared to 5 or 10 years ago. This is because people have made it a business. Like they just getting money from people through initiation because it costs like 10,000 rands to initiate an individual. So it is very important, or it is encouraged, that if you consult a traditional healer and they tell you that you have an ancestral calling, at least consult the 2 or 3 more traditional healers so that they can also confirm what you were told by the first person. And your dreams as well are supposed to guide you of who and where you're supposed to be initiated. So if it is in the water, they will show you the whole entire process. This will come to a person in form of a vision or a dream as well. So the initiation process has no predetermined term or period, since it is up to the initiate to determine how quickly they will grow and when they have acquired the herbs needed to mature in the process. So this is a continuing process, because even after you have graduated from the initiation school, their ancestors will still continue to initiate them. Even in the dreams, they will continue to teach you some of the things that the person that initiated you might have not shown you or might have not taught you. So this is what we call the initiation process. So now let's look at the repercussions of rejecting or ignoring an ancestral calling. A person who ignores the calling may in fact experience the associated symptoms with more frequency and intensity. This will have an impact on an individual's psychological well-being. When a person rejects their ancestral calling, many things may go wrong in their lives, and they may die even. So a person may still have a successful career, but they may have no idea what they have accomplished since they've got that job, or what they have done with the money that they get from the jobs, or whatever successful businesses that they have. Or they may have a wonderful spouse or wonderful relationship, happily married, but are unable to bear children. So it is difficult to ignore the ancestors since they may completely turn the individual's life upside down if they do not get things their way. So refusing ancestral calling will harm not just the chosen individual, but the entire family, which also may cause, if you have domestic animals, any animal that you bring in the house will die. Children will also be unable to sleep at night. Little or no success in getting a job. If you had a job, you might lose it. Some things, like some silly things, can happen at your job, and suddenly they're telling you that unfortunately you've been dismissed with no reason. Like, it doesn't make sense. Why would I be dismissed? You didn't even give me a warning, stuff like that. So you might even lose your job. And also, some who are not married may have unstable relationships. You are in and out relationships. You don't last in a relationship. So these are some of the things that may happen. So ancestral calling to traditional healing may also contribute to the cause of antisocial behavior. So as mentioned while I was talking about other topics, ancestors select their favorite individual within the family to use to communicate with the living. So sometimes the individual might reject the calling for various reasons, such as I'm a Christian, so I don't believe in an ancestral calling. Or maybe you might say, I'm still young, I still want to go to attend parties, I still want to go to nightclubs, I still want to wear a certain way that you're not supposed to wear when you have ancestral calling, or when you have accepted the calling. So those might be one of the reasons that you're saying, no, I'm not going to accept the calling. So the ancestral spirits would infiltrate that individual's life through hallucinations, despair, self-isolation, delusions, and even disorganization. And this will get worse due to the rejection. So these above mentioned symptoms are also referred to as signs of antisocial behaviors by the mental health practitioners. So unless the ancestors' requests are met, the individual with the calling will never find peace. So these are the repercussions. So now let's look at the effect of ancestral calling and initiation process on individual psychological well-being. So tell me, all these things that I've mentioned, after all of these things, would you still be sane if you were going through all these things? So now let's look at how the manifestations and the initiation process can affect the emotional and psychological well-being of an individual. So positive mental feelings such as happiness, contentment are referred to as psychological well-being. Ancestral calling to traditional healing causes action that harm or lack consideration for the well-being of others. The individuals become anxious when they think about their calling and their ancestors' demands, especially when they do not understand the nature of their calling. Also, most individuals who are from humbling backgrounds found their ancestors' demands, such as animal sacrifices and the process of becoming a traditional healer, extremely expensive. And this is stressing them, because animals like a cow, slaughtering a cow is very expensive. Your ancestors know very well that before they even died, you couldn't even afford a pair of sneakers. And now suddenly they're expecting you to afford to slaughter a cow or even a goat for them. So these are some of the things that people say, people with ancestral calling mention that they know very well that I cannot afford to go through the initiation process. I cannot afford to do this and this and this and this for them. So their demands, I find them very unfair, because now they demand things that are not even within my budget, and it's stressing me so much. So that affects their psychological well-being. Other things that take place at the initiation school that may affect the initiate psychological well-being include adapting to the new living environment, slaughtering animals, like I've mentioned, monitoring, they have monitored visits. So when you're at the initiation school, you don't, people don't just come and go like they want to come and see you. The visits are monitored. Your loved ones, when you're having a conversation, your trainer might even be by your side. So even if you are ill-treated at the initiation school, you won't be able to discuss such things with your loved one, because they are here, they're listening to everything that you're saying. Prohibition from engaging in sexual relationships. So it was very difficult, especially for married couples. They find it very difficult. And when unlucky, one may end up with an initiator or a trainer who's rude or abuses their power. So some individuals are tortured, they are starved and sexually assaulted by their trainers, and that leads them into depression. So with all this being said, how do these individuals cope with their situation? They do so by accepting the calling. Accepting the calling is the first step towards healing. According to the African worldview, all forces in nature are constantly reliant on one another. And people with an awareness of importance of maintaining a balance between the living and the dead communities. So when a person accepts the calling, it enhances the connection with the dead community, in this case as the ancestors. And then that's how the individuals end up finding harmony and having a healthy psychological well-being. So this is the end of my presentation. So if you have any questions, you may open your mic. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Izandry. Let me just share my screen for a moment. So can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
So Izandry's presentation follows from two previous presentations that we had. And some of the common themes that come out in the first one was about seeking permissions from the contemporary establishment, psychological establishment. And in the second presentation, one of the things that came out was a discussion on how do we measure. And so I'd like you all to take a moment to scan this QR code and with your phones or other devices, and let's help Izandry by completing that evaluation. So any questions, comments, thoughts, concerns that anyone might have about this presentation, about some of the things that Izandry presented on ancestral calling and how that impacts, or the ways that that shows up in psychology, in contemporary psychology. And I was interested that in her presentation just now, she was referring to many different types of psychological diagnoses and their presence or manifestations in that are associated with the calling. So anybody got any thoughts on or questions or need to know more from Izandry about this?
Hello.
Yes, hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Mandu.
Okay, I'm driving. Let me stop. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Dr. Mandu, I would suggest if you're driving, you pull over to the side of the road rather than
Okay,
drive and do this, because driving is a complex task. And I would suggest for your safety, you do that.
Okay, I stopped. This was very interesting. I felt that I would not miss it. So, Izandry, thank you very much for your insightful presentation, Munareng. And the good thing is that I'm also Pedi and I'm home. The first question that I have, I don't know whether because I don't know whether you are a traditional healer yourself or you are a student. If you are a traditional healer, I have a question because as Pedis, I feel like somehow we are robbed of our language, especially when our people are going for this initiation. I feel like in most of the time, they use the Zulu or Nguni, Stogoza, Gogo. And I'm asking, do we have our own words? Or maybe if we are talking about our ancestors, how did we arrive here where we now adopt the language? Because I feel that when it comes to the initiation, the training, the language is very key, you know? So I don't know. That is number one. And number two, you said something very important, which I have also observed, that nowadays we have so many people who are going for the training. And what concerns me nowadays is that we see a trend of younger people. So I'm not so sure, is it more, if we remove the issue of money, is it not kind of related to a prevalence of mental illness and challenges? Because in the past, when somebody goes for an initiation training, right, or initiation or the training, they will come and specialize in different fields. You find that we have the one who is a pediatrician and in our language. And then we find that there is the other one who uses the bones to diagnose. The one is a healer in a certain way. But when they come nowadays, they will go and they come and nothing happens. So I'm asking myself, if they go for the training, what is it for? Those are my two submissions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mandu. I'm not a healer myself. I'm just a student that have conducted a study on the ancestral calling. So firstly, yes, as Pedi people, we also do have our language. I mean, we have the terms for the same terms that the Nguni people use. That's the first thing that I highlighted when I opened this presentation, that the reason why I chose Pedi culture is because, or the Pedi tribe, is because there is no or little information about our culture on the internet. So I just thought, why not do it for our people? Why not put our people on the map? So that's what I was trying to do. So we do have the terms. For example, ukugida is malopo in our language. Umqombothi, like I said, it's Hlodra. You probably know that. And what I've also realized is that given the geographic area the herbs are different because what the plants that we have in Limpopo and the plants that they have here in Eastern Cape are different from ours, given the geographic area. So what we use for headache, or what our traditional healers use for headache, might not be the same as what a Xhosa traditional healer uses for headache. But at the end of the day, we have the same symptoms, but it is not the same how they are treated. So yes, we do have our terms. It's just that they're not known. We have Malopo, we have Rotwasa. Most people didn't even know that there is a word for initiation process in our language. And another thing is that most people, like you asked, where are Pedi people coming from? So I would advise you to go and look at some literature on that. I've looked at some of it, but I'm not really sure. I don't want to give you wrong information. But I remember that they said the Pedi leader, which is Sukweti. I don't know if you remember the former Pedi leader, Kgoshi Sukweti, was from well, I don't remember the Mzilakazi or something of the Swati people, Matabele Kingdom. So that's how we have some words that are same as Matabele. So even though some words are similar to Ndebele because they are Matabele, we also still have the words that are similar to them. So I don't want to go deeply into that because I didn't also go deeply into the history of our people. But that's how we have some words that are similar to Matebele and Ndebele people. But the culture itself, or the initiation process, the reason why is the same as some of other tribes is because Bafaladi, we migrate from other, I don't know, from other places to Limpopo. And then when you get there, or maybe we get married, I am a Pedi person, I get married to a Xhosa person. So you might find out that my child has a calling, but then called from the mother's side, obviously I'm Pedi, they will have to go and initiate in Pedi, but still I will take that person to an Xhosa initiator. So that's how we end up having these terms of, I don't know, but I see a hand, maybe Litsalo might also have some few things to add because I see Litsalo is also a Pedi surname, so maybe he might want to add few things. So please, Litsalo, you can add on that. Matshepo.
Hi everyone. No, I'm not adding. Actually, I have questions, but you can continue. I think Dr. Mandu asked also on the issue of having a trend of number of, and just go ahead. I'm just in the way you
So
respond.
I don't know why a lot of people, because based on my observation, everyone has a calling. And in psychology, we call it having a purposeful life. So we all have a calling, but not, our calling is not like, we don't all have to go through the initiation process. I might have a gift, I can see things without even undergoing through the initiation process. Dreams come in and I can tell you that I saw this in a dream. So some things like deja vus. But given the situation in South Africa, we don't have jobs, we are starving, and I'm a traditional healer, and then you come to me and you know how people are, desperate people are. So obviously I'm going to feed on your weakness and say, I think you have an ancestral calling, and then I take you myself. I'm not even saying you should go to so and so to get initiated, or be careful or pay attention to your dreams. Your ancestors will tell you where you have to initiate. I'll just say that, no, I'm the one that have to initiate you just because I want to make money from you. I think our economy has put us or other traditional healers in that situation whereby they're just feeding out of other people's weaknesses. So yeah, I don't know if anyone would also like to add, but that's solely based on my observation.
Okay, Sisi, thank you so much. And maybe I'm also giving myself a homework because you know, as a clinician as well, when you said something which is quite beautiful, where you say they will present with certain symptoms, which in some areas, these symptoms are symptoms of mental illness. And I think we need to know what is happening, what is actually happening. Is this more of mental illness, or is this something that needs to be investigated, especially nowadays? Thank you so much, and I've learned a lot from you. Thank you so much, sis.
You're welcome,
Thank you.
Dr. Mandu.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mandu, for sharing that. And I think that raises another question, Izandry. How do we then know when someone is experiencing an ancestral manifestation, or the ancestors are speaking to someone, versus whether they may be in fact having a psychological diagnosis or some psychological issue that is in need of psychological intervention, versus being mistaken for an ancestral calling, or the ancestors speaking through the person? How are we able to differentiate the two things?
Yes, that's a very good question, because where do you draw the line? When do you know if this is a psychological disorder, or when do you know this is a culture embedded disorder? So this is one of the gaps that I identified when I was conducting my study. And actually currently, so I'm looking at it on my PhD. So that's one of my objectives. So I can't say now, but maybe in the next year or 2 years, I'll be able to give you the full information. But that's one of the gaps that I identified.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Izandry. So let me go in order of the hands that are raised. So there's Irene, and after Irene is Brian, and after Brian is Watetu. So Irene, would you lower your hand and ask your question?
Good afternoon. I'm trying to lower my hand.
Okay, don't worry, I'll do it. I'll do it for you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the information that you have shared, Izandry. In the workplace, in my current workplace recently, I have experienced a lot of people that were having, I'm not sure whether to call it a spiritual awakening, wherein they go into a trance and or faint in the workplace. And you find that line managers, as well as staff members from the HR point of view, do not have an understanding of what is it that they need to do to assist the employees who are, undergoing the spiritual awakening or the trance. I am not sure if within your study you have come to find out about this within the workplace, and what were some of the things that were advisable to say, in terms of the workplace, how can we handle this? Because like Dr. Mandu said, it's very prevalent on young adults, or youngsters, and we do not know whether it's a spiritual awakening, or whether it's mental health related. And I appreciate the fact that you said that you found that as a gap within your study. But from an industrial psychologist point of view, within the workplace, what can be done, when employees are undergoing this, or finds themselves in a situation wherein they are experiencing spiritual awakening attacks within the workplace? Let me leave it there.
Okay, thank you so much, Irene, for that question. I think two of my participants also told me that they've experienced the same symptoms that you've mentioned. Excuse me, but they were not aware that they had an ancestral calling. So you find out that the reason why people are not able to help you is because you yourself, you don't know what you're going through, or you don't know what you're experiencing. So sometimes we sit with our problems for so long that it becomes even more difficult for other people to help us. So in the workplace, to answer your question, I've never looked, they didn't even say anything. Most didn't mention it, how they helped them in the workplace. Just one of them told me that they thought she's practicing witchcraft because she will fall and then get injured, but in a day or 2 days or a few hours, that injury has healed. So they suspected her of practicing witchcraft. So she didn't say what it is that they did to help her. But I've read a paper from one of the lecturers at NMU, was a lecturer in the anthropology, which is Dr. Boropa. I don't know if now he's prof, but you can look up for his name and then you can read. I think he's written some few things on experiencing ancestral calling in the workplace, and some people were not getting leaves, or their leave was not being granted to go for initiation process, like stuff like that. So you can write down the name is Dr. Boropa. I don't know his name, but Dr. Boropa, Nelson Mandela University, you probably find him online, and then you can look at some of the articles that he has published. So they talk about both the ancestral calling and the initiation process, and specifically in the workplace as well.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Izandry.
maybe just to add on that, there's issues of stigmatization and discrimination that is experienced by staff members who finds themselves with this ancestral calling experiences in the workplace, which is becoming an issue that affects their well-being and morale within the workplace, as well as their productivity, because they know that, like you said, they are seen to be, others suspects that they might be practicing witchcraft, others sees them as demonic, and they are called in different names. So the reason why I was interested in knowing what your studies could have found is so that we can look at, from the psychological point of view, how can we assist these employees and others to manage issues of human dignity, as well as the employee rights with regards to destigmatizing the issue of African spirituality and so forth.
Thank you, Irene. I'm not sure if Watetu no longer want to ask their question.
No, I still want to ask.
Okay, because I saw you lowered your hand. Please go
Oh,
ahead.
because you said I'm after Brian.
Oh, Brian. Okay, okay, Brian.
Hello, can you all hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. So I first want to say that I literally just had a conversation with my mother on yesterday on things that families here in America do. And as you were talking about, the importance of connecting with ancestors and, the different sicknesses and illness, I'm wondering how we in America can make that connection to Africa, and what is the best way to do that. Because I myself have had several dreams, visions, because I am a seer, and I do recognize myself as a healer here. And there's plights for me to look in different places in Africa. And I can only surmise that that is the ancestors from Africa calling me to these places. So as we are trying to make those type of connections without being manipulated, what is the best way that we can make these connections? Because in my opinion, it is our ancestors trying to bridge that gap so that we can heal for both sides, those that are still in Africa and those of us that are in the States.
Izandry, you're muted.
For someone who has never been in the States, it's going to be very difficult for me to answer that question. But what we do as individuals or as Africans, even though I'm not home, for someone who has been far away from home for a very long time, I've been in Eastern Cape for more than 6-7 years now. So what we normally do, we use a sniff, like a tobacco. There's a tobacco and that comes in a small container that we know, or that we use to communicate with our ancestors. Some even use candles. You lit your candles and then just use that tobacco to just talk to your ancestors and then tell them that I'm so far away from home, so I ask for your protection, I ask for this and this and that. So even if the manifestation are coming in very hard or are hitting you very hard, you use the same method to communicate with them that please be patient with me. I am seeing the things that you're trying to tell me, but I don't have a time, or maybe I'm this far away from home, but as soon as I get home, I will do whatever that you're asking me to do, or I will try to do what you're asking me to do. So if Brian is saying he wishes to connect with his ancestors, I feel like he should also try to find a method that he can use to communicate with them, so that whatever connection that he wants, he can even get through dreams. If he's saying he's a seer, he will also see these things. They will communicate with him in a way that is best suitable for him. Because even I myself, if I dream, sometimes I would use the same tobacco and then just put it on the floor and say, the ancestors, Mbotja ancestors, and I also call both sides of the family, my mom's ancestors and my dad's ancestors, and then I tell them that I'm in Eastern Cape. This is 13,000 kilometers away from home. So if you see me not visiting your home or so forth and so on, is because there's a barrier, there's this happening and then there's that happening. So they go easy on me, and then you get things, or you see things that they want to show you. So I feel like Brian can also find a way to communicate with his ancestors. He doesn't necessarily have to be in that environment to have a connection with his ancestors. I hope that helps.
That did help. And some of the things that you were saying, I have done, so that lets me know that I'm in the right space. But I've often had that question to just because of the disconnection and making sure that we're doing things right and, honoring our ancestors the way that we're supposed to. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian, for the question, and Izandry. Next up is Watetu. Do you want to ask your question, please?
Yes, and I actually just quickly to respond to Brian. Brian, you can also look at saging too, and you can get some of the good tobacco and sage from indigenous sites if you're in the States. So my question was just to follow up. I know we brought up witchcraft a little bit, of where healing is confused with witchcraft. So I just wanted to see, Izandry, in your research, have you seen the impact of colonization on how we interpret the healing pieces and the witchcraft?
No, I haven't, but my supervisor's study is based on that. He's very good with that. I don't know if he's here, but if you read most of his writings, they're based on the tokoloshis, the witchcraft. So Professor Yaseen Ally, just search that, you will find a lot of articles on that. So I didn't look at that one, but my professor, he's very good with such information.
Izandry, I am here. I just came in a little late. And when I heard the question about coloniality and indigenous knowledge systems, I hope that you would direct the question to me. Yeah, if I may just maybe very broadly answer this. Yes, definitely. The impact of coloniality on African belief systems is large, right? And we're seeing the impact of it now, as we have been seeing over the years. For example, the introduction of Christianity into African soils sought to the demonization of African belief systems, and that was considered indigenous. So in many African traditions, you would know that the soothsayers or women were considered to be the protectors, right? The elements of collecting the herbs and natural elements from nature, and then creating these potions to heal people. And what we see with the missionaries and a lot of the research is that with the advent of monotheism, there was a demonization of African belief systems, and witchcraft came to be associated with dark and demonic practices, which is not what it's always about. There is a dark side to witchcraft, but the term witchcraft is also a lot more broader. But it came to represent that particular sector of belief systems. And the reason for that was, if you demonize something and make it seem evil and bad, then you've got to shun it out with what is considered to be good. Which is why you see that in some spaces, which Izandry presented last week, like the ZCC Church, there's an intersection and integration of both culture and religion. And there's been a navigation between the two with many communities. And you'd find even today, many younger generations of individuals either completely dislocate themselves from their cultural belief systems and their traditions and rituals, or they are now very fervently attached to it. And it's just a give and take depending on what and who the person is exposed to. But yeah, we're still busy unpacking that impact, but it is there. I don't know how we're going to undo it. But I know that the process of decolonizing psychology in South Africa has taken to the fore, especially over the past 5 or 10 years. And we're seeing quite a burgeoning of research in these areas. But there is still remaining a gap when it comes to supernatural beliefs that are attached to indigenous knowledge systems. And I'm not sure if it's because people consider this to be sensational, or that many persons are afraid to open these topics because of the unknown. But a lot more is needed on, understanding the impact of bewitchment and witchcraft, spirit possession, mythical creatures, and the like, and how those intersect and influence race, culture, religion, and mental health. I hope that answers or gives you some indication of where we are heading, but I cannot give you a conclusive answer. What I will say is that in South Africa, if you look at some of the research by, I think it's Professor Floretta Bunzai, and I can send that link. She's been writing intensively on a decolonial feminist psychology for South Africa, and locating this with gender-based violence. And obviously, which is quite fascinating. And I think that would give you also a nice link to how we are trying to deconstruct from a Western mode of thinking and reattach ourselves to something that is more African. Okay.
Thank you very much,
so
Professor.
So I was just gonna say thank you. That would be like really impactful because I'm doing some work on Afrocentric praxis and intersections of intimate partner violence, and we are saying that this is a big gap in how we get rooted in Afrocentric praxis. So thank you so much for that, and I'll appreciate the link.
Thank you very much, Professor Ally. Who I'd like to share with you all is the one who initiated and was behind this entire webinar series. So once again, thank you, Professor Ally, for helping bring this entire webinar series and these discussions out in the open. Next up is Letsualo Machepo. And after Machepo, I see that Ayana McCalman post a question in the chat. If Ayana is able to read the question, then after Machepo Letsualo, then let's hear Ayana's question. Machepo, you have a question?
Yes, thank you so much. I actually have thank you so much, Izandry, for the beautiful presentation. And I'm just thinking to myself, I really need to write an article with her sometime. I like it. So maybe my first question would be very personal and say, like, of all the other studies that you could have written on, I mean, psychology is broad and everything else. Why the interest? Why did you end up studying particularly in this? I know you said that you were focusing on Pedi culture because other cultures, Nguni, are sorted out. So I just wanted to firstly ask, why did you end up studying that? Is it very close to your heart? What is happening there? And then the second question would be, okay, now that we've heard this, what would be your recommendation to mental health care now, to particularly the practitioners who might be maybe sensitized to this information? What would be your recommendation in practice? I have other questions, but I feel like maybe let me just give others a chance. I will write some in the chat box. Thanks.
Izandry?
Yeah, Matsepo. So about writing an article, when and where, I'm very ready for the interview. Please contact me whenever you're ready. We can write an article on that. Okay, so with regards to an interest, why ancestral calling and the effects on these individuals, the reason is because I'm from a rural area, and most people have been taken advantage of, and they've been just telling them that you have an ancestral calling, even though they don't have an ancestral calling. Yes, we do have a calling, but not everyone has to be or has to undergo the initiation process. So I've observed, and someone from my family have also experienced some of these things, the repercussions that I spoke about, and some other people that I know, they were also ill-treated from the initiation school. And I thought to myself, how am I gonna be able to help these people? And then I said, for an individual who's in psychology, how about I write a study or conduct a study as a form of an awareness? Because most people, they are aware or they can see these things happening in their community, but they just chose to ignore these things happening. So you also asked, what are the recommendations? So what I would recommend is that social workers need to do a regular visit at the initiation school to be able to identify these schools. Also, traditionals also who train individuals with ancestral calling should at least be registered with a certain what's this? Prof, please help me. So yeah, they should be registered so that they can be identified. If someone wants to report them and say, this is what happening at my initiation school, they can look up for that initiator or trainer on online and say, okay, this is the person that I was initiated with. So also both the traditional. Yes, Prof.
Sorry, Izandry, I think you made a fantastic suggestion about the inclusion of the social workers, but I just want to maybe broaden the debate in terms of the complexity here. When it comes to culture and cultural identity, any question about person's culture becomes an attack, not just on the individual, but on the entire grouping of persons. So, for example, someone like me walking into the Pedi culture and Pedi community, randomly going to give suggestions to the elders, about, these are the things that you should do in the initiation school, or etc., etc. The first question is going to be, who the heck are you? Who are you? Who are you, random stranger, to come in to tell us how to live our lives and how to conduct our cultures? And I think that that's been one of the biggest challenges, even when it comes to attempting to end witch hunts in South Africa, which are still a current reality, that women and children are accused of witchcraft, and then they are killed. They are burned almost, in the same horrific ways that it was done during the Salem witch hunts. The same thing is happening in 2024 in South Africa. But there has been move with, for example, the South African Pagan Rights Alliance of South Africa, where they were moving towards trying to eradicate witch hunts in South Africa. And while there was momentum being gained, even constitutionally, everything came to a halt when it came to the application of those interventions within communities, because people were firstly too afraid to come out and to talk about things like witchcraft and bewitchment. And secondly, they viewed the individuals coming to intervene as being agents of the devil. So it became a bit of a tricky situation, and I think that's where it stopped. And we are yet to develop a means to, intervene on this level. But and another way, just to add more complexity, with the Xhosa community, males have to go through an initiation ceremony. It's called Ulwaloko, where they go into the mountains with the elders, and it's only males that are allowed there. And there's an initiation process that takes place of circumcision. And the circumcision is not done with a knife, but rather with a sharpened stone, as it has been done traditionally. And while there has been much outcry to the many lives that have been lost or the botched circumcisions, um, the process continues as it was, despite the attempts from government and the Department of Health attempting to, intervene, to bring in doctors, to bring in paramedics on scene. It was almost viewed as, if you as a young boy require medical attention, then your transition into manhood is not the way it was supposed to be, and you will not be considered a man. So breaking those cultural barriers is quite a challenge for the healthcare system in South Africa. And we are yet to figure out a way of how do we pluralistically intersect and work together. I know I haven't answered your question, and I know Izandry hasn't either, but I hope what we're doing is giving you an indication of just how complex the situation becomes or is.
I think also, Professor Ally, just as you were talking about male circumcision, we have similar issues about female genital mutilation, or
Yes.
or with clitoridectomy that are taking place. And we see, even though there were laws in many countries against clitoridectomy, but we're now seeing that some of these laws are being repealed, or there's a traditional return to reinforcing or returning to them. So that's also another issue that I don't know how traditional cultures will be able to adapt to changing modern times, or to adapt to modern times that will incorporate more liberal views, more non-traditional things to restrict or remove clitoridectomy or circumcision. And for the various reasons why medically or health-wise, or even for the sake of sex and pleasure, that both are involved. So that's a whole other conversation which we could have. I just want to go now to Ayana, who had raised a question in the chat. Ayana, would you want to share your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you very much for the research. I feel it's very valuable and interesting, especially for those of us who are not on the continent, but in the diaspora. So I had two questions. Well, the first question has already been answered about its availability. The other main question is whether or not you have any data now, or you plan to do future data looking at mental health misdiagnosis and tracking the signs of ancestral calling, and how that impacts on the wellness and the well-being of the persons that you are studying. Reason I'm asking that question is because listening to the presentation, I have a concern just from my own intuitive experience and listening to the experiences of others. This is now from the diaspora, that a lot of what sometimes is classified as mental health is really a misdiagnosis, and really is an ancestral calling. But because there's no data, there's nobody available talking to us about the rites and the rituals concerning these things, we end up being misdiagnosed. And the ancestral calling side of it isn't tracked. So do you have any data now? Or is there any plans for future studies to link the two things? What is a misdiagnosis, and looking at how the signs of the ancestral calling can impact our wellness and our well-being?
Thanks, Ayana. Hang on, Izandry. I think also, Ayana, your question goes to the discussion we had on September 13th, where it emerged in the discussion post the presentation about how do we measure the mental health, or how do we measure the traditionals' impact on mental health and mental health's impact on traditionalists? And that was one of the things that came up. It says, well, there is nothing really that we can use because Western psychology is all about data collection and measurement and looking at this scale and that scale, whereby in the traditional sense, we don't have those kind of measurement metrics. And so how do we then navigate those two? And that was one of the questions that came up in the last, on September 13th. I don't know if Izandry or even Professor Ally or Dr. Mandu might have thoughts about that kind of data collection, or whether it is possible to do data collection, because some things you just can't measure. So I don't know. Dr. Ali, Professor Ali, you want to go ahead, and then maybe Izandry can jump in?
If I can, just to say that if you listen to the first presenter, Odwa's talk, and then Tembeka's last week, and then Izandry's today, the questions that are being raised are the sort of questions that are being addressed by my students in their current PhDs. So yes, what we are doing is we are attempting to bring the two groups of individuals together, psychologists and traditional healers. And we are going to be presenting a case study that represents mental illness the symptoms that represent mental illness and spiritual illness. But we're not going to label it, and we're just going to ask, both sides, well, how do you understand these symptoms? And from that perspective, we're going to work on, how do we actually work towards diagnosis? In which instant would we refer to a psychologist or a traditional healer, etc.? So what Izandry is doing with the study is, I think for the first time, bringing psychologists and traditional healers into the same room at the same time to discuss one particular case study. That is what I'd say right now. We are collecting the data. There is available data, but it isn't as broad as we would like it to be at this point in time.
Thank you, Professor Ali. Dr. Mandu shared in the chat that Professor Makahela, Lela, and Professor Sodi have published extensively on this area. And just also to refer to some of the comments that you made, Professor Ali, that the work of Professor Shanaz Sufla and Professor Copano Ratele, as well as Professor Floretta Bonzaire, are people that we can look to for reference. Izandry, do you want to share some more on this?
No, Prof has said it all. Like, I'm recently doing that on my PhD, so we'll find out later.
Okay, good.
Can I just add something?
Yes, Dr. Mandu.
Okay, in 2010, we had our first conference that was organized by the Forum of African Psychology at the University of Limpopo. And it was so beautiful that we managed to be the clinicians, the researchers, and the traditional healers in the same room. When we were discussing as to how can we have a way forward where we collaborate, and the traditional healers were so willing to be part of the bigger family. But one thing they also highlighted was that in as much as we collect data, in as much as we learn from them, in as much as we refer clients to them, we should respect their space, because they have noted that we as researchers and clinicians, we have a tendency of collecting data and just leaving them like that. And so I think the future is bright. And I think as we are also planning to have a conference again, we are going to see how the traditional healers would like to work with us even in future, such that even if I'm a clinician, I'm not even scared to say to my client, okay, I can see that perhaps maybe your chakra, your chakra is closed. Can you go to a traditional healer? Perhaps they open this. This is not more of a mental illness. This is more of spirituality. Can you attend to that? But in as much as we do at the current moment have some restrictions because of the HPCSA and so forth, but I see that the future is bright. The more we engage, the more we respect their space, the more we appreciate what they are doing, I think we are going to win.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Manu. So coming up on October 15th is Mama Chepo Letsualo is going to present for us. Is there the possibility of collaborations between medical, traditional, and religious healers in mental health care? So this kind of continues the same vein and the same conversation. So we encourage you to register and share about the webinar series far and wide, so that we can also have another robust discussion on October 15th. Is there the possibility of collaborations between the medical, traditional, and religious healers in mental health care? This all leads up to the Ancestral Institute, which is coming up on November 8th to the 10th. And we are looking to do this at Casa de Cultura Ruth Hernandez Torres in Puerto Rico, where we are partnering with the traditional, with the ancestral, the indigenous communities in Puerto Rico, the Taino community, that have their roots in the Locono, Arawak, and Carib communities in the Caribbean. So we are partnering with them to do and build the Ancestral Institute, working there in Puerto Rico. So once again, thank you very much. I see there are a couple of chats. Oh, there's one more question I see here. Is it from Machepo? Can one choose to be in the church as a spiritual healer or traditional healer, even if they have undergone the traditional healing, or it's a must to be in a traditional space? Anybody want to jump in on that one? Before we close out?
So I think, can I go for this one? I
Yes.
think it depends on where your ancestors are directing you to. In some instances, you find that we have a traditional healer, but at the same time, we say "Kingaka ya metsi," meaning a healer that is using water. Then it's a combination of the apostolic in our space, is a combination of apostolic, which is more of church, and also the traditional. My elder sister, have gone to those two spaces because what we say, the ancestor that she was serving or she's serving, gave her a direction that first you have to go for the traditional way, and thereafter, when you come back, you can go to the church. So yes, you can mix or you can either choose, but then it depends on what the ancestor is directing you to.
Thank you very much. And I see I have a final comment here from Watetu. As we continue to decolonize the work, we are shifting from the framework of Eurocentricity is the only way, and we are getting more open to other ways of knowing. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining and participating in today's webinar. And we look forward to seeing you on October 15th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.